Have you ever witnessed a moment so shocking, so emotionally loaded, that it forces you to question everything you thought you knew about a relationship? Because that's exactly where this story begins, with a single sentence that Prince Harry allegedly said about Meghan Markle, a sentence that insiders claim froze an entire room and left even seasoned palace staff glancing at each other in stunned silence. A sentence no one ever expected from the man who once walked away from an entire monarchy for the woman he loved. And that sentence was this: "She is not my wife." Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let that sit with you for a second. Imagine hearing someone say that about their partner, their spouse. After years of presenting a united front, after countless speeches about love, loyalty, and breaking free together. Now imagine that sentence wasn't whispered in private, not muttered under stress, but said in a moment charged with jealousy, frustration, and a clash of rivalries so old and so deep that they practically define modern royal drama. What would make Harry, of all people, reach that boiling point? And more importantly, what exactly did Meghan do to trigger it? Because according to sources, and trust me, these are sources who have been consistent, detailed, and alarmingly aligned with each other, Meghan made a move toward Kate Middleton that crossed a line Harry didn't even know he still cared about. A move so unexpected that it didn't just set off Kate, or William, or palace aides, but Harry himself. A move so deeply rooted in jealousy that even outsiders could feel the shift in the air. But here's the real question. Was this the moment that broke the illusion? Was this the instant when Harry realized something he had been ignoring for years? Or was it simply the boiling over of tensions that had been simmering since Meghan's first day inside the royal system? Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see why this moment matters, why it's happening now, why insiders are suddenly talking, why the dynamic between Meghan, Kate, and Harry has reached a stage where the stakes aren't just emotional. They're reputational, political, and deeply personal. And why that one sentence, "She is not my wife," may represent something far more symbolic than anyone realized. But let's not rush. Let's take this step by step, because this story isn't just about one outburst. It's the culmination of years of tension, rivalry, public performance, private conflict, media manipulation, and the clash of two very different visions of what royal identity should look like in the modern world. So let's rewind. It began, according to those present, with what seemed like a harmless gesture, innocent at first glance. But you know how sometimes people say one thing but mean another? Or how a look, a tone, or a movement can say more than an entire paragraph. That was the moment Meghan made toward Kate. It was subtle but sharp, slight but loaded. And if you've ever been in a room where two people quietly dislike each other but must pretend to get along, then you already know how electric and awkward that atmosphere can become. Insiders describe the moment as unnerving, icy, and unmistakably intentional. Meghan leaned in with a smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. Kate responded politely, but not warmly. Harry watched closely, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. And staff, especially those who have lived through the stormy Meghan-Kate years, immediately felt tension ripple through the room. But why? What made that gesture so significant? Why did it matter? Why did it strike Harry so deeply that he later snapped with words that he couldn't take back? To understand that, we have to revisit the unspoken rivalry that has shaped the entire Sussex, Wales narrative from the very beginning. Let's be brutally honest for a moment. Meghan and Kate were never going to be best friends. Not with their opposing personalities. Not with their conflicting approaches to royal life. Not with the media constantly fueling comparisons, pitting them against each other, dissecting their every outfit and expression. Meghan is bold, expressive, strategic. Kate is disciplined, cautious, understated. Meghan charges into rooms wanting to be the center of attention. Kate enters with quiet authority that comes from nearly 2 decades of preparing for a role she never bragged about, but was always destined to fill. These are not small differences. These are foundational, identity-level contrasts that determine how each woman interacts with the world and with the institution around them. And Harry? Harry is stuck in the middle. Torn between the love he had for the family he left behind and the loyalty he felt toward the woman who helped him escape the institution he claims traumatized him. But what happens when loyalty clashes with reality? When your partner's actions force you to confront contradictions? When the person you defended starts displaying behaviors that make you question whether they have your best interests at heart or their own ambitions? This is where the jealousy factor comes in. And no, this isn't tabloid exaggeration. This is something insiders, from staffers to royal correspondents to people who have worked directly around the couples, have consistently described for years. Meghan's sensitivity to Kate's position. Meghan's resentment of Kate's popularity. Meghan's frustration with traditions that prioritize Kate. Meghan's strategic efforts to ensure she's never overshadowed. So when Meghan made that move, that gesture toward Kate, it wasn't random. It wasn't spontaneous. It was deliberate. A message disguised as civility. And Harry recognized it immediately. Let's pause here. Think about your own life. Have you ever witnessed someone pretend to be polite, but use that politeness as a weapon? Have you ever seen someone try to outshine, undermine, or subtly embarrass someone else, all while smiling? If so, you know exactly why this moment changed everything for Harry. Because Meghan wasn't trying to get along with Kate. She wasn't trying to build bridges. She was trying to assert dominance. And Harry, in that instant, confronted a truth he had avoided for years. Kate wasn't the problem. Kate never was. The problem was the rivalry Meghan insisted on having with her. But this is just the beginning. The gesture was merely the spark. What came next, the escalation, the confrontation, the emotional eruption, is where the story gets explosive. Witnesses claim Harry's expression changed. His body stiffened. He looked at Meghan not with admiration, but with confusion, even disappointment. And Meghan, sensing his shift, attempted to regain control of the moment, but it was too late. Because Kate's reaction, calm, composed, almost painfully dignified, highlighted the contrast. Kate didn't rise to it. She didn't snap. She didn't return fire. She simply absorbed it and moved on, which only made Meghan's gesture appear more calculated. And that is what set Harry off later, behind closed doors. But before we get to that confrontation, you need the full picture. You need to understand why this moment hit Harry so hard. Why it pierced through everything he had been telling himself. Why it triggered a reaction so visceral and so revealing. Because Meghan's relationship with Kate and Kate's silent power have haunted Harry since day one, whether he admits it or not. And this is where we dive into the tension that has always existed between these two women. The tension Harry has constantly tried to mediate, justify, or deny. The tension that finally reached a breaking point. Now, you might be wondering, why does this matter right now? Why are we hearing about it now? And the answer is simple: timing. The royal family is at a pivotal moment. Public trust is shifting. Popularity polls are tightening. The Wales family is stabilizing their image after a difficult year. And the Sussexes, especially Meghan, are watching the narrative slip from their grasp. Whenever that happens, pressure rises, and mistakes get made. Which brings us back to the moment Harry said those infamous words, "She is not my wife." Because according to those who heard it, he didn't mean it literally. He meant, the woman you're acting like isn't the woman I married. It was a statement of shock, a confession of disappointment, a moment where the mask slipped and truth poured out. But that's later. For now, we're still building toward it, still tracing the path that led to that volcanic release. And right before we dive into the first chapter, the chapter where the jealous move finally gets revealed in full detail, I want to leave you with this question. If you were Harry, and the person you gave up your world for suddenly behaved in a way that made you question everything, what would you do? Hold that thought, because what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Have you ever watched someone make a move so subtle, so deceptively gentle, that everyone else in the room completely missed it, but you knew, instantly, that something was off? Something calculated? Something that didn't fit the moment at all? Because that's exactly what happened in this situation, and it became the spark that lit the fuse to everything that came after. You see, most people expect jealousy to be loud, messy, almost theatrical. But the truth is far more dangerous. Jealousy is often quiet, controlled, delivered with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. And the moment Meghan made toward Kate, oh, it was exactly that kind of jealousy. The kind wrapped in sweetness but dipped in venom. The kind Harry recognized before anyone else. Picture it. A crowded room filled with the low hum of polite conversations, clinking glassware, and carefully curated smiles. The kind of room where appearances matter more than emotions, and every gesture, every glance, every word is a performance. Kate was speaking with a small group, gracious, poised, not pushing herself forward, but naturally becoming the center of the space she occupied. Kate has never needed to beg for attention. She carries an ease, an elegance that feels unforced. People gravitate to her because she makes them feel seen. Meghan walks into rooms wanting to be seen. Those are two very different energies, and when they collide, the room feels it. Meghan drifted over with that signature half-smile she uses when she wants people to believe she's being friendly. But anyone who has observed her long enough knows that smile changes depending on the audience. And the one she wore that day? It wasn't warm. It wasn't open. It wasn't welcoming. It was a challenge disguised as charm, an invitation to tension wrapped in a lovely, camera-friendly expression. She stepped closer to Kate, not too close, not invasive, but just close enough to shift the energy of the group and subtly redirect attention toward herself. Now here's where it gets interesting. Meghan didn't interrupt. She didn't speak over Kate. She didn't even raise her voice. No, she did something far more strategic. She placed a gentle, almost sisterly hand on Kate's arm in a way that was meant to look supportive, but wasn't. It was performative. It was symbolic. It was the kind of move that says, without words, I'm aligning myself with you publicly, whether you like it or not, because it makes me look good. But that's not all. Insiders say that Meghan leaned in, smiled sweetly, and delivered a line that sounded complimentary on the surface, but had an undertone so cutting that Kate's faint, polite smile faltered for half a second. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever heard someone compliment you in a way that felt more like an insult? A compliment so polished that calling it out would make you look petty, but pretending you didn't notice would make you look weak? That's exactly what Kate was dealing with in that moment. And the worst part? She knew she couldn't react. She knew she had to swallow it politely, because that's the royal way. But Harry saw everything. Harry's eyes caught the micro-expression on Kate's face. Harry caught the shift in the tone. Harry recognized that Meghan hadn't approached Kate with warmth. She had approached her with competition. Meghan's comment, something casually dropped about Kate's newfound confidence or stepping into her role in ways Meghan had always hoped she would, carried the kind of subtle sting that was meant to seem supportive but clearly wasn't. It was the kind of line that staffers recognized instantly as veiled criticism. Meghan wasn't praising Kate. She was undermining her while pretending to praise her. And it worked, for a split second. A few people smiled or nodded politely, unsure of how to interpret the moment but unwilling to risk a faux pas. After all, royal etiquette demands silence over scandal. But Harry stiffened. His jaw tightened just enough that those who know him could instantly tell he was uncomfortable. And for a man who has always been fiercely protective of the people he loves, his mother, his brother, and especially Kate, this moment hit differently. It wasn't just socially awkward. It was disrespectful. It was unnecessary. And it was the latest in a long line of moments where Meghan seemed determined to challenge, compete with, or overshadow Kate at every opportunity. So why was this moment such a turning point? Why did this one act matter more than all the others? Because of timing, because of context, because of intention, and because Harry, after years of frustration and emotional conflict, finally saw something he could no longer ignore. Meghan wasn't trying to coexist with Kate. She was trying to assert dominance over her, and that realization shook him. But let's slow down for a moment. Let's peel back the layers that led up to this moment, because you can't understand Harry's explosive reaction later without understanding what built up before it. Meghan's rivalry with Kate didn't appear out of nowhere. It didn't start with one bad headline or one awkward family event. No, this rivalry was constructed slowly, brick by brick, move by move, over years. And each brick carried a message. Meghan wanted Kate's place, or at least Kate's spotlight. And here's where the emotional contradiction gets fascinating. Meghan often claimed she rejected royal traditions, roles, expectations. She rejected the hierarchy. She rejected the idea that anyone should be above or below anyone else. But at the same time, she craved the exact kind of admiration Kate naturally received. Isn't that ironic? How can you resent the hierarchy while simultaneously wanting the benefits of being at the top of it? How can you claim to dislike the spotlight while meticulously sculpting your public image? Harry saw this contradiction, even if he didn't acknowledge it. And on that day, in that room, that contradiction became impossible to ignore. Meghan approached Kate not with humility or grace or genuine affection. She approached her with strategy, with performance, with the intent to redirect attention back to herself. And when Kate's response remained dignified but cool, Meghan sensed the subtle rejection. And that's when Meghan did what she often does in uncomfortable moments. She acted louder with her gestures while keeping her words soft. A tilt of the head, a lingering squeeze on Kate's arm, a slightly forced laugh, each one meant to regain control of the narrative. Kate didn't take the bait. She never does. Kate's greatest strength is her emotional stillness. She doesn't react. She doesn't crack. She doesn't retaliate. And that alone drives Meghan crazy. Because Meghan is someone who feeds off reactions, public attention, emotional responses, dramatic tension. Kate gives her nothing. And that nothingness becomes its own form of power. But the real breaking point came not from Kate's non-reaction, but from Harry's realization. Because for the first time in a long time, Harry wasn't looking at Meghan with admiration or sympathy or protective resolve. He was looking at her with confusion, with disappointment, with that subtle, heartbreaking expression people wear when they finally see something they've been trying not to see. His eyes followed her as she continued smiling and gesturing, performing warmth that didn't match her energy. And that look told insiders everything. Harry was starting to see the cracks. Let me ask you this. Have you ever defended someone so fiercely, so blindly, for so long that the moment they show you a side of themselves you didn't want to believe existed, it feels like the ground underneath you shifts? That's what was happening to Harry. This wasn't one moment. It was the moment that revealed the truth about all the other moments. And it only got worse from there. Because after Meghan's subtle jab, she didn't step away. She lingered. She inserted herself into conversations meant for others. She redirected questions toward herself. She smoothed her hair, adjusted her stance, flashed that camera-ready smile. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to reclaim the center of attention. And the more she did it, the clearer the contrast with Kate became. Kate remained calm, composed, graceful. She held herself with quiet confidence, the kind born not from ambition but from authenticity. And Meghan, despite all her effort, could not overshadow her. And for someone who demands control over narrative and perception, losing that battle, even momentarily, stings harder than any headline. Witnesses say Meghan's smile grew thinner over the next few minutes. Her eyes darted more. Her movements became sharper. She sensed the energy shifting against her, and that made her push harder. And Harry watched all of it. Every glance, every gesture, every silent battle. And with each one, a realization grew inside him, one he could no longer push down. But the moment that truly crossed the line came minutes later, and it was so quietly delivered that only a handful of people caught it. Meghan leaned in closer to Kate, lowered her voice just enough to hide the sting from casual onlookers, and said something that made Kate blink twice in surprise. It was a line packaged as a compliment, but meant as a warning, a reminder, a subtle assertion of superiority. Something along the lines of, "It's nice to see you finally feeling comfortable enough to shine." It was phrased sweetly, delivered kindly, but the meaning was unmistakable. Kate's response was simple, a soft, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes, a small nod, and then she gracefully stepped away from the group, redirecting her attention elsewhere, and cleverly avoiding further conflict without allowing Meghan the satisfaction of a reaction. But Harry? Harry heard the tone. He heard the intention. He saw how Meghan's eyes flickered with the thrill of landing the jab. And it hit him harder than anyone expected. Because this wasn't just Meghan being competitive. This was Meghan trying to assert power over the woman Harry respected more than almost anyone in his life. And that was the moment, according to those who saw it, when something inside Harry snapped. But not yet publicly, not yet loudly. That would come later, behind closed doors, in a moment that would become legendary among those who witnessed it. For now, all Harry did was stare. A long, heavy stare that one staff member described as the look of a man finally seeing the truth he didn't want to see. Let that sink in, because that was the real beginning, the real spark, the real turning point. And Meghan, in her attempt to outshine Kate, Had no idea she had just set off the emotional detonation that would soon explode into Harry's shocking sentence. Have you ever felt an emotion hit you so fast, so unexpectedly, that you barely recognized yourself in the moment you reacted? That's what happened to Harry. People often imagine anger builds slowly, brewing beneath the surface until it spills over in a dramatic eruption. But the truth is, some of the most explosive emotional moments come not from a long build-up, but from a single instant where everything finally clicks. An instant where the truth hits so hard that it knocks the air out of you and pulls a reaction straight out of your gut before your mind even catches up. And that instant came for Harry mere minutes after Meghan's subtle but deliberate jab at Kate. The moment the door closed behind them, the shift was immediate. Gone were the polished smiles and the carefully controlled expressions they had worn in public. Gone were the measured tones and the royal etiquette. As soon as they stepped into the private corridor, quiet, dim, away from wandering eyes, the tension that had wrapped itself around Harry's chest snapped like a wire stretched too thin. And the first thing he did was exhale the kind of breath people release only when they've been holding in something heavy, something painful, something they couldn't say out loud until the world around them disappeared. He didn't raise his voice at first. That's the detail insiders emphasize. This wasn't him storming in, ranting, shouting, or losing control in the explosive way tabloids might imagine. No, his first reaction was stillness. Stillness that felt sharper than anger. Stillness that felt like the quiet before a storm. Meghan turned to him with that smile she uses when she wants to smooth things over, when she wants to pretend nothing happened, when she hopes charm will erase tension. But Harry wasn't in the mood for charm. He didn't want soft words, or excuses, or strategic explanations. He wanted truth. And his eyes, those eyes that had softened around Meghan so many times in the past, were filled with something unfamiliar. Confusion, disappointment, hurt. The kind of hurt someone experiences when they finally realize something they've been denying for months, maybe years. Meghan stepped closer, reaching for his arm, but Harry took half a step back. Not dramatically, not rudely, but instinctively. And if you've ever had someone pull away from you in a moment where you expected closeness, you know exactly how much that tiny gesture can feel like a slap. Meghan froze for a split second. Not visibly, not theatrically, but internally. She knew something had shifted. She knew Harry had seen something she didn't want him to see. She knew her performance with Kate didn't land the way she intended. So she attempted to recover. She started speaking. Soft voice, gentle tone, offering explanations, brushing off the moment as harmless, misunderstood, exaggerated. But the more she spoke, the more Harry felt that sting in his chest. He didn't want excuses. He didn't want PR-style damage control. He didn't want to hear the same rationalizations he'd heard 100 times before. He wanted accountability. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's words felt more like rehearsed lines than genuine emotion? Where someone's explanations sounded too polished, too curated, too perfectly timed to be honest? That's what Harry was hearing. He heard the charm, but not the sincerity. He heard the justification, but not the remorse. And something inside him cracked. He interrupted her. That alone shocked Meghan, because Harry rarely interrupts. Not in private arguments. Not in emotional conversations. Not even when he's frustrated. He is the type to listen, to internalize, to pick apart his feelings before responding. But this time, he cut her off mid-sentence. And when Meghan blinked in surprise, Harry delivered the line that would later be whispered across social circles, staff hallways, and insider channels. She is not my wife. Yes, he said it. Not with rage, not with dramatic flair, but with a voice that trembled with something deeper than anger, disappointment. And disappointment cuts far deeper than anger ever could. Meghan's face went still, completely still. Her mouth parted slightly, as if she couldn't process what he had just said. It wasn't the words themselves that hurt her, it was the meaning behind them. Because he didn't mean that legally or literally. He meant it emotionally. He meant, the woman you're acting like isn't the woman I married. Not the woman I defended. Not the woman I believed in. And that cut her pride. Because Meghan sees herself as a master of perception, of image, of narrative control. She is used to reading the room, guiding the conversation, steering the emotions of the people around her. But in that moment, she lost control, not of the room, but of Harry. And for a woman who values control above almost everything else, that loss hit hard. Meghan's expression hardened just slightly, a flicker of defensiveness, a hint of indignation rising behind her composed features. She stepped closer again, this time more assertive. She questioned him. She asked what he meant. She demanded clarity, because Meghan hates ambiguity, and she especially hates emotional ambiguity from Harry. She wanted him to explain himself so she could counter it, reshape it, reframe it. But Harry was already unraveling. He didn't want to explain. He didn't want to argue. He didn't want to play the game of emotional chess he felt Meghan often pulled him into. He wanted honesty. Raw, unfiltered honesty. So he said it again, only this time with more force behind the words. The woman you were just now, that's not my wife. Let that hit you for a moment. Imagine hearing that from someone you've built your public identity around. Someone you claim as your partner in every interview, every headline, every speech about breaking free from the monarchy. Someone whose love story you've held up as proof that you could change the world together. And now that person is looking at you as if you've become a stranger. Meghan's reaction shifted. At first shock, then hurt, then indignation, then anger. Her eyes narrowed. Her chin lifted. Her voice tightened. Insiders say she asked him if he was defending Kate over her, if he was taking sides, if he was blaming her for the chilling tension that had filled the room moments earlier. Harry didn't respond immediately, because he didn't want to fall into the trap of making it a rivalry between the two women he cared about. But his silence, especially with Meghan, spoke volumes. And Meghan knew it. So she pushed. She insisted that Kate had been cold to her. She insisted that Kate always acts superior. She insisted that Kate plays the victim. She insisted that the British press controls Kate's image and weaponizes it against Meghan. She insisted that the whole system was designed to elevate Kate and diminish her. And while Harry had listened to these arguments for years and defended Meghan each time, this time, something felt off. Instead of empathy, he felt exhaustion. Instead of protectiveness, he felt clarity. Instead of anger at the monarchy, he felt frustration toward Meghan's behavior. And Meghan sensed it. She raised her voice, not in a scream, but in a tone sharp enough to cut through the quiet corridor. She demanded to know why he was only upset at her rather than at Kate. She demanded to know why he didn't correct Kate's coldness. She demanded to know why he didn't defend her the way he used to. And Harry, caught between anger, sadness, and shock, finally said something that stunned her. I defended you for years, but you weren't defending us. You were competing. That sentence might be one of the most painful truths Harry ever said. Because Meghan didn't see herself as competing, at least not outwardly. But Harry, after years of conflict between the two couples, finally realized what he had been denying. Meghan always needed to win. She needed the spotlight. She needed the narrative. She needed to be seen as the one who overcame, who triumphed, who shined brighter than anyone else, including Kate. And that realization shattered something inside him. Meghan's face tightened. Her voice dropped to a cold, controlled whisper. The tone she uses when she feels cornered. She accused him of choosing Kate over her. She accused him of being blind to the pressure Meghan faced. She accused him of being manipulated by the royal machine he claimed to hate. But Harry didn't budge. His expression remained frustrated, exhausted, and unmistakably wounded. Let me ask you something. Have you ever reached a point in a relationship where you suddenly realized the arguments weren't really about the arguments? Where you could see the patterns repeating and the intentions behind the words clearer than ever before? That's where Harry was standing emotionally. In that hallway. Behind that closed door. Facing the woman he once saw as his great escape, but now seeing her through a lens he had never used before. He realized Meghan wasn't trying to bridge anything. She was trying to win, and she wanted him to help her win. But here's where the twist comes in. The twist that no one, not even Meghan, saw coming. Harry didn't just snap because he was angry at the moment. He snapped because that moment brought together every unresolved tension he'd been carrying. Every subtle jab Meghan had made toward Kate over the years. Every moment he'd felt his loyalties stretched and tested. Every time he'd been forced to choose between the family he knew and the life he built. Every accusation, every justification, every contradiction. And this time, he couldn't keep silent. He told her Kate wasn't the problem, that she never had been. And Meghan, stunned, responded with disbelief. and then fury. But before she could deliver her full rebuttal, before she could launch into the speech she had prepared in her head, something unexpected happened. Something that shifted the energy in the room so sharply that Meghan's next words caught in her throat. Because someone else had heard them. Someone else had been standing just outside the door. A witness. And what that witness heard would only make everything worse. Have you ever had a moment in your life where you thought something was private, intimate, raw, unfiltered, only to realize someone else was listening the entire time? Someone who wasn't supposed to hear the truth you've been swallowing for years? That's what happened in that quiet corridor, in that heated moment between Harry and Meghan. Because when Meghan froze and Harry's breath caught in his throat, they realized the worst possible thing. A palace aide had paused just outside the door, their hand resting against the frame, their head tilted slightly, as if caught halfway between approaching and retreating. And in that frozen second, everyone understood the same brutal truth. The conversation was no longer private. The words already had wings. Harry saw the aide first. Meghan turned a moment later, and the shock on her face was almost cinematic. Wide eyes, tense jaw, a flash of panic that she tried to hide with an instant composure. But insiders say something shifted in her posture, an awareness that she had just lost control of the narrative. And Harry, whose emotions were already stretched thin, looked at the aide with a hollow expression, as if realizing that this moment, this argument, wasn't just between him and Meghan anymore. It had become part of a larger story, a story already fueled by years of rivalry between Meghan and Kate, a story that would soon spin wildly beyond the walls of that hallway. But here's the thing, this moment didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't born in a vacuum. It wasn't the result of one offhand comment, one look, one piece of tension. This was the climax of something that had been simmering since the first moment Meghan stepped into the royal world. A rivalry so subtle, so unspoken, yet so powerful that it shaped every interaction between the two women. And if you want to understand why Harry's breaking point mattered so much, you first need to understand the unspoken war between Meghan and Kate that had been unfolding for years. Let's rewind to Meghan's early days, when the world first celebrated her entry into the royal family. The press called her a breath of fresh air, a modern addition, a symbol of diversity, change, and progression. And for a brief moment, Meghan basked in a glow unlike anything she had experienced before. But while the public was enchanted, insiders say Meghan paid more attention to one thing than anything else: the comparison. The press didn't just praise her, they compared her to Kate. Constantly, dramatically, sometimes unfairly, sometimes excessively, but always in a way that framed the women as competitors rather than collaborators. And Meghan noticed every word, every flattering headline, every critical one, every fashion comparison, every body language analysis, every "who wore it better" segment, every "Kate did it first" commentary. Meghan noticed. Let me ask you this. Have you ever entered a space where someone else already shines so brightly that you feel overshadowed just by being near them? That's what Meghan walked into. Kate had already built a decade-long relationship with the public. She was polished. She was consistent. She had earned trust not through theatrics, but through quiet stability. People saw Kate as comforting, predictable in the best way, graceful without needing to perform. Meghan was used to being the standout, on the red carpet, in Hollywood circles, on TV sets, in interviews. Her identity had always been built on personality, charisma, and visibility. But the royal world operates differently. In the royal world, subtlety wins. Consistency wins. Silence wins. And for someone like Meghan, who had thrived on being seen, heard, and admired, that shift wasn't just foreign. It was suffocating. So the rivalry began, not from direct conflict, but from the collision of two worlds, two identities, two forms of womanhood that simply couldn't coexist without friction. Kate was the future queen, the steady one, the silent one. Meghan was the disruptor, the expressive one, the outspoken one. And guess which one the institution favored? Guess which one tradition prioritized? Guess which one the public instinctively trusted? It wasn't Meghan, and she felt it deeply. Insiders say Meghan often compared herself to Kate privately, not in obvious ways, but in subtle tones. Questions about why Kate received certain praise. Questions about events. about visibility, about roles, about treatment, about responsibilities. And each time she brought these concerns to Harry, he would reassure her, defend her, comfort her, support her. But even Harry couldn't deny the most painful truth. Kate had something Meghan couldn't replicate: public goodwill that wasn't earned overnight, but built slowly, authentically, through years of unglamorous work. That comparison haunted Meghan. And jealousy? Jealousy doesn't announce itself with screaming. Jealousy whispers. Jealousy stirs. Jealousy hides behind tiny comments, subtle gestures, strategic timing. And over time, insiders noticed a pattern. Meghan would strategically place herself in moments meant for Kate. She'd wear outfits reminiscent of Kate's iconic looks. She'd schedule public appearances or announcements on days that mirrored Kate's timeline. She'd release photos or stories when Kate was trending. None of this happened by accident. And Kate, ever the diplomat, never confronted her, never fought back, never escalated. She simply continued being Kate, and that only made Meghan feel more threatened. Because how do you win against someone who refuses to play? So by the time the moment in that room happened, the subtle jab, the tension, the performative sweetness, Harry wasn't just reacting to one comment. He was reacting to years of Meghan's rivalry with Kate. Years of tension he had tried to ignore. Years of contradictions he had tried to rationalize. Years of defending Meghan while quietly hoping the two women would eventually find peace. And what made this moment a breaking point wasn't the gesture itself, but the accumulation. Imagine spending years trying to balance loyalty to your partner with loyalty to your family. Imagine listening to private complaints, criticisms, frustrations about the same person over and over. Imagine watching two people you care about playing emotional chess while pretending everything is fine. Eventually, something snaps. And that something snapped inside Harry in that hallway. But let's go deeper. Let's dig into the earliest signs of the rivalry, the things most people never saw. One of the earliest cracks appeared during the famous bridesmaid fitting incident, an event so disputed, so emotionally charged, that both sides still tell different stories. Meghan reportedly cried. Kate supposedly cried. Meghan said Kate made her cry. Kate stayed silent. The public believed what it was told. But what went unseen was the emotional fallout between the two women after that moment. They never recovered from it. Not really. Not privately. Not emotionally. Kate saw Meghan as unpredictable. Meghan saw Kate as judgmental. Kate saw Meghan as dramatic. Meghan saw Kate as privileged. Kate wanted peace. Meghan wanted acknowledgement. And Harry? He became the emotional referee. But here's the painful truth. Every rivalry has a root. And the root of Meghan's rivalry with Kate wasn't hatred. It wasn't pettiness. It wasn't malice. It was insecurity. Insecurity that she wasn't embraced the way Kate was. Insecurity that the public preferred Kate. Insecurity that the royal system protected Kate. Insecurity that Harry still held an unspoken loyalty to Kate, one Meghan couldn't break or replace. Because whether Meghan liked it or not, Kate had been part of Harry's life long before Meghan arrived. Kate wasn't just William's wife. She was Harry's sister-in-law, a confidant, a friend, at least in the years before the feud began. Harry had admired Kate's steadiness. He had trusted her. He had defended her. He had shared inside jokes with her. And that bond never truly dissolved, even when the relationship between the couples fractured. Meghan knew this, and it bothered her. So the rivalry deepened silently, privately, emotionally, through little things that outsiders would never notice, but insiders saw all too clearly. Even small details. Seating arrangements, speaking order at events, how staff greeted them, who photographers focused on, became emotional landmines. Meghan cared about optics. Kate cared about duty. And those two things rarely align. This is the battlefield Meghan walked into. And instead of navigating it with caution, she walked into it with ambition. And ambition, when threatened, becomes jealousy. So in that hallway, when Meghan realized Harry had finally recognized the pattern she'd been hiding with charm and performance, she felt fear. Not fear of losing the argument. Fear of losing Harry's blind loyalty. Fear of losing emotional control. Fear of losing the narrative she'd worked so hard to protect. And then, making everything worse, that palace aide who overheard the argument gently cleared their throat. Meghan turned sharply. Harry froze. The aide murmured an apology, but it didn't matter. The damage was already done. They heard Harry's explosive line. They heard Meghan's accusations. They heard the emotional unraveling. And if one aide heard it, insiders know how quickly things spread. One whisper becomes two. Two become five. Five become a narrative. And that narrative always finds its way back to the people involved. Especially Kate. Because Kate would soon hear exactly what happened. Exactly what was said. Exactly what Meghan did. Exactly what Harry felt. What do you think a person does when they realize their private argument isn't private anymore? When their carefully controlled image is at risk of slipping straight through their fingers? Most people retreat. They pause. They lower their voice. They panic internally. But Meghan Markle is not most people. And the moment she realized a palace aide had overheard her explosive exchange with Harry, she didn't soften. She didn't retreat. She didn't calm down. Instead, she did something that left even Harry speechless. She doubled down. Because Meghan understood something very clearly in that moment. Once a seed of a story has been heard by someone else, you either lose control of it, or you get ahead of it. And Meghan, above all else, is a woman who refuses to lose narrative control. She has built entire public arcs on the foundation of controlling timing, emotion, optics, and perception. So when she turned toward the aide, her expression didn't reveal embarrassment. It revealed calculation. She plastered on a smile so quickly that it almost looked mechanical. Her voice softened instantly, shifting into that honeyed tone she uses when she wants to appear gracious, misunderstood, or victimized by circumstances beyond her control. She said something like, "Oh, you didn't hear all of that, did you?" with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. And before the aide could answer, before Harry could intervene, Meghan stepped into the role she knew best, performer. She spoke as if the argument had been a misunderstanding, as if she and Harry were passionately discussing pressures and public expectations and narrative challenges rather than jealousy and rivalry. She turned her body slightly toward Harry, placing a hand against her chest in a gesture meant to look vulnerable, as if she needed the aide to see her as the reasonable one. The calm one. The emotional victim of royal coldness and institutional oppression. But here's the thing about performance. Sometimes it reveals more than it hides. Because Harry saw all of it. The shift into charm. The calculated softness. The sudden sweetness in her voice. The way she angled herself toward the aide, not to calm the situation, but to reshape it. She wasn't trying to fix the tension with Harry. She was trying to fix the story. And that hit him hard. Have you ever been in a moment where you're arguing sincerely, emotionally, vulnerably, and then the person across from you suddenly switches personas because someone else is watching? And you realize the argument was never really between you and them. It was between their ego and their audience. That's what Harry experienced. And that realization was like pouring ice water over the heated storm inside him. But Meghan wasn't finished. Once the aide excused themselves, awkward, stiff, clearly unsure of what to say, Meghan turned back to Harry with a look that had completely changed. Gone was the softness. Gone was the charm. Gone was the strategic vulnerability. Her expression hardened into something sharper, tighter, more determined. And that's when she said the sentence that shifted everything. This is exactly why I have to be better than her. Her. Not the press. Not the institution. Not the public. Her, Kate. Harry's face fell. Insiders say the color drained from his expression. Because Meghan wasn't blaming external forces. She wasn't claiming pressure or misunderstanding. She wasn't describing rivalry as a reaction. She admitted, plainly, openly, that she was actively trying to outshine Kate Middleton. That her actions weren't accidental. They weren't misunderstandings. They were intentional attempts to compete. And that admission shattered something inside Harry. Because if Meghan was trying to outshine Kate on purpose, then the subtle gesture earlier wasn't a misstep. It was a tactic. And the comment she made to Kate wasn't poorly phrased. It was deliberate. Harry looked at her as if seeing someone he didn't fully recognize. That's what insiders say. As if her confession confirmed the suspicion he had been trying to suppress. As if he realized rivalry had become a guiding principle in her behavior. Meghan, however, didn't seem to understand the gravity of what she'd admitted. She pushed forward, her voice gaining speed and intensity as she tried to frame her competitive instincts as survival. If I don't stand out, I disappear, Kate has the whole machine behind her. I can't just fade into the background. Everything favors her. And yes, there's truth there. Meghan did enter a system built for Kate. But instead of accepting that reality and carving her own path, Meghan tried to force the system to revolve around her. So she leaned into the one strategy she felt confident in, overshadowing. And nowhere was that more evident than in what came next, the calculated attempt to outshine Kate, not just emotionally, but publicly. Because the very next opportunity she got, Meghan made a move so bold, so orchestrated, and so transparently competitive that it became one of the biggest red flags Harry had ever witnessed. It began with an event Kate was set to attend, one of those polished, refined appearances that highlight her poise and dedication. Meghan knew the timing. She knew the press coverage it would get. She knew the imagery. She knew how the public would respond. But instead of giving Kate her moment, Meghan arranged a counter moment. She planned a surprise public appearance. Unannounced, perfectly styled, professionally photographed, timed almost to the minute. Her goal? To hijack the spotlight. Let me ask you something directly. Have you ever noticed someone who can't let others shine? Someone who always needs to insert themselves into the center, even when the moment isn't theirs. It's a red flag in friendships, workplaces, families. And in a royal setting, it's magnified tenfold. Insiders claim Meghan carefully selected an appearance that would appeal to the same demographic Kate was winning over. She wore an outfit guaranteed to draw attention, vibrant, dramatic, contrasting with Kate's usual elegant minimalism. She made sure photographers were present. She made sure her team was ready to push the images online. She made sure everything was designed to trend. And for a moment, it worked. The photos hit social media. Headlines began shifting. Commentators started comparing the two appearances. And Meghan looked satisfied, victorious, as if she had checked off a box on a list no one else knew she had. But do you know who noticed almost instantly? Harry, Kate, William, and Palisades. Because this wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. Kate, in her quiet composure, continued with her event, refusing to let the moment draw her into pettiness. But those close to her saw it. Saw the way her expression flickered when she caught wind of Meghan's timing. Saw the way William's jaw tightened. Saw the way Kate's team exchanged glances behind her. They were used to Meghan's PR timing. But this was blatant. Too blatant. And Harry saw the fallout. Online, within the family, within the staff. He saw the comparisons heating up. He saw the way Meghan watched the coverage with a gleam in her eye, waiting to see if she won. And that's when it hit him. Kate was never competing with Meghan. Meghan was competing alone. And Harry felt ashamed. Because this wasn't what he wanted his marriage to be. A constant battle for visibility. A rivalry disguised as empowerment. A strategic war against someone who didn't even want to play. He confronted Meghan again. This time not in anger, but in a kind of exhausted sadness. Why did she do it? Why overshadow Kate? Why choose that moment? Why orchestrate something so obviously competitive? Meghan defended herself fiercely. She claimed she was reclaiming her narrative. She insisted she needed visibility. She said Kate already had everything: support, love, attention, and Meghan had to fight for scraps. But to Harry, it didn't sound like survival. It sounded like ego. It sounded like she wanted to defeat Kate instead of coexist with her. And the part that hurt Harry most was when Meghan said, "I'm only doing what I need to do to stay relevant." That word, relevant, hit him harder than anything else. Because relevance isn't something Kate worries about. Relevance isn't something Diana chased. Relevance isn't something stable royal figures seek. They seek purpose, responsibility, service, not relevance. Relevance is something celebrities chase, not royals. And Harry felt the distinction deep in his bones. He realized Meghan wasn't fighting for recognition within the royal family. She was fighting for celebrity dominance. And that realization burned him. But this was only the beginning. Because Meghan's attempt to overshadow Kate didn't end with that event. She escalated. She pushed harder. She became bolder. She made a move so massive, so narcissistically timed, that insiders still speak about it in disbelief. In that move, her most daring attempt to outshine Kate yet, would be the moment that turned the private family tension into a bubbling crisis. Because Meghan wasn't just trying to outshine Kate publicly. She was trying to rewrite history. To claim a moment that wasn't hers. to position herself in the spotlight of something sacred, meaningful, and deeply tied to Kate's legacy. And when she did it, Harry erupted in a way he never had before. Because no one, absolutely no one, saw this next move coming. Have you ever watched a situation unfold and felt the creeping certainty that someone, somewhere, was going to talk? That no matter how many doors were closed, no matter how many whispered conversations were tucked safely away inside palace walls, the truth would eventually spill out? That's exactly what began to happen in the wake of Meghan's bold attempt to overshadow Kate. The moment she executed that move, timed, styled, choreographed to snatch the spotlight from the future queen, the quiet murmurs inside the palace began to vibrate. Because staff members, they see everything. They hear everything. And most importantly, they feel everything. Royal aides are trained to be invisible. They blend into walls. They fade behind pillars. They glide silently down hallways. But just because they're silent doesn't mean they're blind. They absorb the energy, the shifts, the tension. They catch the raised eyebrows, the clenched fists, the clipped tones. And after Meghan's stunt, insiders say the atmosphere became thick enough to cut with a knife. You know that feeling when you enter a room where someone has just had an argument? The air feels charged, heavy, unsettled. That's what the palace felt like. It began in whispers, staff members exchanging looks as they passed each other, a raised eyebrow near the communications wing, a quiet sigh in the private offices. People who'd been around for decades, who had witnessed scandals, feuds, and royal meltdowns. Suddenly speaking more cautiously, glancing over their shoulders, sensing that something was brewing behind the scenes. Something that wasn't just marital tension or sister-in-law rivalry. Something deeper, something darker, something dangerous. And the first leaks didn't come from anger. They came from shock. One aide described Meghan's behavior as relentlessly performative, noting that she seemed more invested in optics than in relationships. Another aide said her actions toward Kate felt surgical, as if she had studied Kate's mannerisms, timing, and public rhythm, then deliberately chosen ways to interrupt or overshadow it. Another claimed Meghan planned moments around Kate's calendar with startling precision. But the most explosive comments came from those who witnessed Meghan's behind-the-scenes demeanor. The tone she used when cameras weren't around, the way she spoke to staff, the way her mood shifted depending on whether she was receiving the attention she craved. One staffer said she would enter a room and scan it, not for people, but for impact. Impact. That word was repeated several times by different insiders. Impact was Meghan's priority. Not harmony, not teamwork, not subtlety. Impact. And impact often came at Kate's expense. But let's slow this down and really dissect what these insiders saw, because understanding their perspective is key to understanding the tension that eventually shattered Harry's patience. Staff members described Meghan as unpredictable, warm and charming in one moment, cold and cutting in the next. She had a way of turning her attention on and off like a spotlight. When she wanted to be adored, she was magnetic. When she felt threatened, she became strategic. When she felt ignored, she became dramatic. And unfortunately for Kate, Meghan often felt threatened by her presence. Why? Because Kate didn't have to try. Kate didn't have to demand attention. Kate didn't have to battle for relevance. Kate simply existed, and people gravitated toward her. That is a hard dynamic for anyone to accept, especially someone who has built her entire professional identity on charisma and visibility. And Meghan was not just navigating that dynamic quietly. She was reacting to it, calculating against it, emotionally sparring with it. Staff began noticing patterns. Moments where Meghan's attempts to overshadow Kate weren't just public gestures. They were woven into the private fabric of their relationship. They described Meghan correcting Kate, commenting on her posture, offering unsolicited advice about speeches, complimenting Kate in ways that sounded more like challenges, always with a smile. Always with a tone that suggested sisterly warmth but carried an unmistakable competitive edge. One aide said, "It was like watching a chess game where only one player knew they were playing." And Kate didn't play. Kate didn't counter. Kate didn't escalate. Kate simply disengaged. And that disengagement infuriated Meghan. Because for someone who thrives on reactions, silence is the most frustrating weapon. A person who will not play cannot be beaten. And Meghan, consciously or not, kept trying to provoke engagement. But it never came. Now this brings us to the moment when leaks began to escalate, when insiders started noticing Meghan's attitude toward staff. They described her as intense, driven, laser-focused on image. But they also described her as dismissive, demanding, and occasionally demeaning in ways that took the staff by surprise. One insider said, "She didn't care about protocol. She cared about perception." Let that sink in. Not protocol, not relationships, not hierarchy. Perception. She needed to be seen as the groundbreaking, misunderstood trailblazer. And when staff didn't adopt that narrative, she grew frustrated. And frustration bred tension. And tension bred conflict. Staff members described moments where Meghan snapped at them for tiny mistakes, moments where she insisted things be rearranged last minute for better optics, moments where she micromanaged so aggressively that everything felt like a production. And what's worse, she would often compare herself to Kate in these moments. Ask why Kate received certain treatment, why Kate's photos received certain edits, why Kate's teams seemed more cohesive, why Kate was trusted more. And every time she did it, staff members grew more fatigued. Because Kate never complained. Kate never demanded. Kate never compared. Kate never needed to perform. That contrast became exhausting for those working behind the scenes. But the single most alarming story came from a senior aide who witnessed something that, in their words, made their stomach drop. It happened just a few days before Harry's infamous breaking point. Meghan had been preparing for an event, another one scheduled suspiciously close to a major Kate engagement. Staff say she spent hours deliberating over outfits, lighting, camera angles, even the precise window of time when photos should be released. The tension in the room was palpable. Meghan paced. She rehearsed her expressions. She repeated lines she wanted to deliver with impact. She asked for opinions and then dismissed them when they didn't align with the look she wanted. Then, in an uncharacteristically quiet moment, she said something staff would never forget. "I need to look like the future of this family. Not part of the family. Not supportive of the family. The future of the family." You can imagine how that landed. Especially because Kate is the actual future queen. The room went silent. Staff exchanged glances, and one aide said they saw something flicker across Harry's face, something like disbelief, or dread, or both. Because in that moment, Meghan wasn't just trying to outshine Kate. She was trying to replace her. And that realization, although Harry didn't verbalize it then, hit him like a blow. Now let's go to the moment when leaks truly spiraled, after Meghan's overshadowing stunt. Staffers who had been silent for years suddenly began speaking in hushed clusters, comparing notes, connecting dots. Some were worried. Some were stunned. Some were relieved to finally understand the source of the tension they had felt but couldn't articulate. And a few, just a few, began to leak details. Not out of malice. Not out of revenge. Out of concern. Concern for Kate, who remained gracious and unreactive despite being continually targeted. Concern for Harry, who looked increasingly torn, exhausted, emotionally frayed. Concern for the institution, which felt fractured in a way they hadn't seen since Diana's era. Concern for stability, for dignity, for sanity. One comment spread like wildfire. "She's trying to tear down someone who hasn't done anything to her." That didn't come from press. That came from staff. Another said Meghan spoke about Kate with a level of resentment that didn't match Kate's behavior. Another said Meghan seemed to believe she was in competition with a woman who wasn't even playing the same game. And perhaps the most chilling comment of all, she treats Kate like an obstacle, not a person. That was the moment the palace realized something needed to be contained, prevented, managed. But it was already too late, because Meghan was about to take things further, much further. Her next move, born from insecurity, desperation, and the need to outshine Kate at any cost, would become the most shocking attempt yet. A move so bold, so unprecedented, that it forced even her own supporters to question her intentions. A move that pushed Harry past the edge. A move that Kate would eventually hear about. A move that staff would leak to the world. And that move is exactly where everything truly unraveled. Because Meghan wasn't done competing. She was about to challenge Kate in the most personal way possible. And the consequences? No one was prepared for them. Have you ever watched someone lose their grip on a situation and respond not with reflection, not with humility, but with even more control, with even more pressure, with an even tighter grip on the very thing that is slipping away from them? That was Meghan in the days after her infamous attempt to outshine Kate. Instead of retreating, reassessing, or recalibrating, she leaned in harder. She doubled down on strategy, optics, image management. It was as if she sensed the walls closing in. Whispers growing louder, staff growing uneasy, Harry growing distant, and her response was to push even more aggressively for influence. The more unstable the ground beneath her became, the harder she dug her heels into it. This chapter isn't about public appearances or flashy headlines. It's about the behind-the-scenes maneuvering Meghan undertook to reshape narratives, to regain control, to ensure she was positioned exactly where she believed she belonged, in the center. And the key to understanding everything that follows, the confrontations, the collapse, the heartbreak.